and we engaged with Beamible to enable the redesign of your role, and we wanted to work out a way that we could accommodate the shift. Can you share with us some of the key things that you were looking to achieve through the role design process?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess my initial desire, the history is I had been working at Campari Group for, around 6 years as a full-time employee previous to having kids. And then initially came back in a part-time role, which was a 3-day role, which I guess worked for the business at the time a couple of years back, but there wasn't really a lot of thought that got put into it. It was I guess just the business trying to work flexibly with me and me working flexibly with them. After I had my second child, the desire was to kind of return to the business in a similar capacity to having my first child, but with a role that I guess suits both the needs of myself and the business and was sustainable as well. So I guess this is where there was the opportunity to engage the team at Beamible to understand exactly what that meant so that it was a sustainable role as opposed to let's just do this type of strategy. So I guess my requirements were I was looking to come back initially as a scale up approach, beginning at 3 days a week, which allowed me some of the flexibility to work, let's call it close to standard hours of 3 days a week, but, more or less flexibly depending on the week's need, while Campari's requirements were making sure that they could fill a senior role as a senior brand manager, but with a part-time face. So I guess that's kind of what we were both trying to meet.
Yeah, great. And I guess going through the process, there must have been some challenges. What were some of those hurdles that you faced going through it?
Yeah, I guess we're now in December and I started back in September. So we've done around 3 months of the role only. So we're definitely still in the early days of it. Initially, some of the obstacles we faced were, I guess, mentioning the level of the role and it being a senior marketing role. Obviously, with the expectation that at my level, I could still work on, major brands within the business that had commercial impact and making sure that we could actually convince stakeholders that that role would be managed well on a part-time basis. In response to that, I had quite a few meetings before I started with, my boss, my director, and obviously yourself, Nelly, to understand, exactly what the expectations were and making sure that it was going to be achievable. One of the other obstacles was actually nutting out the exact elements of the role, which, myself together with the person who was previously filling my role and, other internal stakeholders like yourself and my boss kind of worked really hard to delineate like what the actual breakup of the role is, and we had many iterations of what that might look like. An obstacle initially because of how much work had to go into it, but definitely helped us to provide some clarity into what that overall role makeup would look like and whether it was or wasn't going to be achievable in 3 days. The biggest question I had off the back of that was, if it wasn't, what are we going to do to change it?
Yeah, so it sounds like it was definitely working towards the Campari value of together, in that there were a lot of vested people to try and make this work. In terms of being able to make it work, how did you go about solving some of those challenges?
Yeah, and I think to add on that, it was also a value of doing more with less. So the reality is, and especially in, today's day, it's not about always having a face 24/7 available. And, I would say one of the major changes that, aside from, my role being flexible, is that, Campari's obviously instilled this value of, I work at times that suit me, and communicating that internally and externally. So whilst, there is this ideology around my role, there's a lot of other kind of elements that are being looked at as well. I did express like some of the concerns on my end around the role looking very heavy in some particular areas. We initially looked at how we can manage that internally with our team, which is something we're working on now. For example, the process actually helped us to uncover some, roadblocks in the role, such as, us having to spend 5 hours or 6 hours a week in internal WIP meetings, which is something that we could then take a look at and try to understand where we can work a bit more efficiently to manage everybody's time better. And I think moving forward, one of the other key areas which we're continuing to look at internally and with the Beamible team is what that looks like from a wider team capacity. So is it things like moving around activities, trying to understand the workflow and the peaks and troughs, and when are we expecting over the next, let's call it 12 months, to have a higher velocity of work, where we can think now, be it December 2021 into all the way to December 2022, where might we need some extra resourcing. And that's something that we're in the middle of working through right now. And I guess that was talking to my point around the how do we do this in a sustainable manner, which is probably a big step up from when I was doing 3 days previously.
Yeah, I think you raise a really valid point, and I guess it's about the impact of the whole role design process, and how that not only impacts you and the business but the wider team, right? So what do you think about that impact in terms of your fellow camperistas and the impact that has had?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, it's had a really positive take on. From my perspective, I've always, full-time or part-time, had the expectation that you're flexible with the business and the business is flexible with you. Again, even more so in this time and age with COVID. So, for me, for example, I will sometimes work 4 days because that's what the requirement is, and we haven't managed like the team element of it yet. So I might end up working a bit more in some weeks, but there's also times when I'll leave at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 4:30 to go and pick up my kids, or I might be late from drop off. So that like, I guess from my end, works really well, and there's a lot of understanding and respect both ways with that. And regards to the wider team, again, I think it's a learning curve. At the moment, I am one of the only part-time roles in marketing. There is another 4-day role as well, and that's a newly created role. So that's something which, the team's really starting to work in, and understand like how we can manage that to, make sure that nothing slips. But there's been really positive kind of momentum around it. And I think the great thing is that, all the way up to director level, and our MD, everyone is really keen to make it work. And, it's probably, like I said, a bigger business discussion also around how can the whole team be flexible. You don't have to be a mother. You could be doing anything. Everyone's life has their own kind of different priorities. How do we make that work for everybody? And I think this is, the first of many steps which Campari is starting to really undertake to make it a flexible workplace for everybody.
Yeah, I really like your view about diversity and inclusion, and that it doesn't have to involve working parents, that there is a whole realm of different people that make up our business that could potentially benefit from this.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about how the role's going in terms of the opportunity it gives you outside of work, but what about inside of work? Like, how is it going in terms of the outcomes and you personally?
Yeah, again, it really depends on the week. And, here we are coming into the last week of the year where it's absolutely manic. Everyone's trying to close out every single account, get every project briefed in. And it's a crazy week. But as an overarching statement, from my perspective, it's working really well. For me, I am a flexible worker, and I might choose my own hours to work in. And I guess it comes down to everybody's working style. Like, my working style has always been very detail oriented, and I'm, the type of person that doesn't like to let anything slip. There, have been some examples where I can foresee the week that's coming ahead, and, you know, there might be a presentation for global, which I'm not going to get to because it's just not high enough on the priority list. And I can see the complexity that it's involved. Whilst, you know, we've developed this, you know, relatively sustainable program for a 3-day week, one of the big discussions which I had, like, with my team at the beginning of me starting back was, you know, there will be times where I can foresee if something's not going to be able to be achieved, and I guess the solution is more around having those discussions up front. So not to the point of handballing, but flagging rather, where there's something that's not going to be met. And just recently I did have to do this, and I had to ask my boss Mark to help me to complete something, which he was more than happy to do. And that was something that we just had to work together as a team for. But I guess the key learning of it is flag early. And from my perspective, to just stay really on top of everything, because I may not have face in the business 5 days a week, but that doesn't mean I'm not thinking about work 5 days a week or 7 days a week when there's things that need to happen. It's just more around managing your own schedule. And, you know, this is just something, a change in mindset in which how you manage, you know, your workload. And again, I think that doesn't only apply to people who are working a part-time role. It applies to really everybody. So it's just a slightly different way of thinking, but it's all being managed pretty well at the moment.
Okay, great. And I guess in terms of like future approaches to flexibility, do you think the Beamible tool is a tool that you'd recommend for people in similar situations that are looking for a kind of change in days or fewer hours?
Yeah, I see a real lot of opportunity in the tool around using it, you know, wider across the business to really understand that whole aspect of team capacity and how do you actually drive the business to work more efficiently and effectively. Whilst my role is as a 3-day role and a part-time role and something newish to the business is a really kind of great step forward, I think it could actually provide and uncover some really interesting areas to identify any like workload and capacity gaps. And make sure that, you know, everybody, just dependent on their role, is working to the best of their ability and also not being completely overworked, you know, with the example of understanding where we're spending maybe so much of our time or too much of our time. I think there's definitely a lot of opportunities there. I think the great thing on our end is that it's helped to provide a lot of role clarity, both for myself and the team, understanding what everyone's key objectives are. It's a very easy dynamic system to use, and it's been really easy to get the support and buy-in from a lot of the top management in Campari. So that's been something that's made it quite an easy program to instill into what we're doing.
Yeah, Nat, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your insights. You were the first at Campari to trial this tool, and we're looking forward to working with you over the next few months and years to make this a sustainable outcome, not just for you, but for future Camparistas who are looking for flexibility, so that we can continue to create a really diverse, inclusive and great workplace where people feel like they really belong. But thank you for your time.
Great, no worries. Happy to help and happy to be the test study and keep understanding how we can, you know, make it work for the role and use it as an ongoing tool, which I think is the most important bit.
Great. Thanks, Nat.